Good evening and welcome to Tripping on Legends. We are on episode 98. Episode 98. I can't believe that the show itself has actually been on for more than 98 episodes, actually. How do I know that? Because I am following Tripping on Legends on social media. Well, also because I made everything. But are you following Tripping on Legends on social media? I am your host, Christopher Balzano. You can find me on Instagram at Spooky Balzano. Spooky Tripping, I'm sorry. On Twitter at Spooky Balzano. And, of course, our Facebook page, which is www.facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. This podcast has been around for... We're coming up on 5 years, which the episodes might not significantly be able to tell you because you're like, wait, you only do an episode? Yeah, we kind of only did an episode every once in a while for a while, especially at the beginning. So if you haven't caught those early episodes, you can go to iTunes, you can go to Google Play, you can go to Stitcher, you can go to everywhere except for Spotify, and tell them that you want to hear us by, by following us. Have you guys noticed at least the iPhone podcast thing is completely messed up. It's like all wacky and stuff like that, but you can still leave us a review if you've listened to us, and if you haven't, if this is your first episode, if for one reason or another, maybe it's the topic, tonight's subject matter, maybe you're just kind of like coming upon us for the first time. If you haven't heard those other episodes, then subscribe and see what you're missing, and make sure you're catching us every Friday, every Tuesday at 8:30 on Midnight FM.
Where it's always midnight.
Thank you. As you guys can hear, Ella is in the house. She's not quite ready to come on camera yet. She is. All my children, for some reason, have decided to take showers as I'm doing the show. So Devin is actually in the shower right now. Ella's laughing from off camera. A rainstorm has just started, so we're hoping that this dark and stormy night doesn't impact the show, because as we all know, being in Florida, when that lightning starts to hit, sometimes the internet gets all wonky. I say 100 episodes, but it really is almost 150 episodes. We have, back in the day, before I basically shot it live all the time, well before we were on Midnight FM, we would do live episodes and we wouldn't number them. So even though we're saying that it's 98 episodes, there are much more out there for people to find. I want to thank everyone who is in the chat room with the Facebook Live. That's honestly the best way to follow Tripping on Legends, because that's where I do the live show on Tuesdays from, and I'm able to interact a lot more with people. So that's the best way to follow us. That's the best way to get in contact with us. We do have a little bit of it's probably both an anniversary and it's a milestone coming up, right? So it would make sense then that we should do something special for our 100th episode. I'll tell you right now, episode 99 is, I intend to be the episode I wasn't able to record last week about the influence, the moving of the needle caused by the new podcast, Bridgewater. I wanted to do that last week. I had technical difficulties, we'll call them, and I wasn't able to get online. So I know I'll probably be cutting that later on this week, and maybe even go Facebook Live for it. I'm not quite sure if I need to or should. But what should we do for the 100th episode? Like, we need to do something special. What could we possibly do?
We should have an Ella special.
So Ella says it should definitely be Ella-centric, and that she should be on. I know that we won't have an episode next week because I am actually going to be on a different radio show at this time. So the 100th one will be an Ella week. But the idea is, what should the subject matter be? What should we cover? I hate to do a recap show. I hate to do, 100 episodes in kind of thing. So I would love the feedback of people. Please hit me up on Instagram at Spooky Tripping or on Facebook to tell me what you think we should do for our 100th episode. And should we try to get, remnants of the past to come in, or, maybe get Deanna to come in again if we can convince her to brave the nighttime again and come over here to do the show or something else. As you know, if you've been following the show at all, our driving force is the idea of #Follow the Signs. So 2 weeks ago, we did an episode, which we still have the graphics for behind me because I haven't changed them yet.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can't draw. We did an episode called The Haunted First Date. And it was really fun. It was a really fun episode. I'm not sure how much information, folklore we actually got to, but it was fun recording it with Elle and Deanna. And one of the legend trips, one of the first date recommendations that they had, and there's Ella.
Yay!
One of the recommendations they had was for an abandoned train station. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know, you're not on the camera at all.
Oh, yeah, I know.
All right, beautiful. So I'm moving over. Scudge,
Here we
beautiful. And I was like, yeah, I might do that. That's when we could do it. And we were kind of taken aback because it was in the Keys.
Oh, yeah, that was the one we really wanted to go to, right?
Yeah, and I think that we all swiped right on that one because I am obsessed with ghost railroad stations or ghost trains in general. We've done a few over the course of Tripping on Legends. Obviously, the very first Legend Trips episode and the very first Legend Trip was to the Venice train station. Since then, we've covered ones in Astor. We've covered ones in... we've covered our Astor. You have braces. And
Really?
I'm trying to think of some of the other train ones we've done.
Windley.
What'd you say? The Barnum and Bailey?
I don't remember what it's called, but there's a train, like a circus train.
That's the Venice train depot. That's
my
Venice
bad.
train depot. So I've always been kind of obsessed with the idea of a ghost train. I'm gonna put that here, and we'll kind of hold it right here.
Okay.
When we first started Tripping on Legends, there was an unspoken guiding force, and it was always unspoken until one day Natalie and I looked at each other and went, "You ever noticed this?" And we both agreed on it that we don't go south, right? That there is something about Miami that is just, I don't know if it's intimidating, I don't know if it just seems too big, but we've never done anything that's in Miami. Although I think one of the very first episodes we actually talked about a couple that was on a date in Miami at this sub shop, at this sandwich shop that had something that was crazy. We did an episode about Key West when her and I went to Key West once. I'm looking at, and we touched upon it a little bit in last week's episode, I'm looking at it, and it's actually, to where we're going to go for this legend trip, is actually less time than it takes to get to Orlando.
Really?
It is. Like, for some reason, I have this fear, this, like, weird mind block. It's not a fear, it's like a mind block of things that involve Miami and south of Miami. So, I've never taken you guys to Coral Castle.
No.
I've never taken you guys to Miami. I've never even really, we haven't done too much on the East Coast. This one is perfect. So, just keep that in your mind too, that I'm trying to do new and different things, and I actually have a few gigs in the Miami area virtually in October. So I'm searching, and I'm looking at that legend, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get over my southness, and I'm going to drive. Do you think maybe it's the Boston in me? Like, I don't want to go any more south, and the fact that, like, I'm going to get trapped or something like that.
Yeah. You hate it here.
Yeah, Dad, you hate it here. And I'm going to, Ella, you can contribute what you want to contribute. Ella hasn't been prepped for this show at all. I didn't think she would be interested. We're having dinner, and she's like, I totally want to be haunted. So, all right. I'm going to allow that. I'll allow it. And I found the reason behind that haunting. So what do you do? What do you remember about that abandoned ghost train section? Do you remember anything about it whatsoever?
Not really.
You don't remember anything?
No.
Wow, 2 weeks is a really long time.
I know, right?
What do you think was appealing about it? Do you remember at least like anything about that part of it? No? You're amazing. So
I know, I'm so smart.
I discovered that the reason why that's abandoned has to do with a holiday that we just celebrated.
Yom Kippur?
No, not Yom Kippur, although happy Yom Kippur. A little bit late.
Labor Day?
Labor Day, yeah. It all has to do with Labor Day. So I'm like, hashtag follow the signs. Everything kind of fit in. Everything kind of like synced, and it was like, dude, we need to do this. This is episode 98, The Hauntings of the Labor Day Hurricane of 1935.
Yeah, you were like, there's a hurricane. People are dead. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that was my summary to
That
her.
was
There
her
was a
summary.
hurricane, people are dead. So, 1935. Can you tell me anything that you know about history when it comes to like 1935?
I have to really think about it. Like, I had to use all my brain power. I don't remember the years. I just remember the dates.
What as a person, and I think it's interesting for us to remember like what was going on in 1935 in this country, because it totally sets the tone and the atmosphere for why this was going on.
Tell us, Dad.
Not
What
only
happened
does
in
history,
1935?
I'm glad you asked. History not only doesn't exist in a vacuum, folklore and legends don't exist in a vacuum, right? So we have to imagine the way the world was in 1935. This storm. Now, I always say I took a deep dive, right? I fell down a rabbit hole, took a deep dive. I am going to start out tonight's show by saying this might be the epitome of tripping on legends, in that there is so much conflicting information for something that is a historical event that is almost 100 years old, right? It's 84 years old, or 86, I can't remember what, carry the one or whatever. There are conflicting information here, and I think there's conflicting information because it involves the U.S. government. And whenever you get the U.S. government involved, things are going to get messed up. Yes, we have the Great Depression, and we also have coming out of the Great Depression. So, yeah. This has been called, this hurricane of 1935, which was, to some degree, not predicted well, right? Could you imagine we didn't have the same kind of technology we have now, so even predicting a hurricane back then, and I'll get to one of the interesting predictions that happened with this. It devastated Florida, and if you know anything about hurricanes, when they happen and when they hit Florida, because of its location, the Keys usually get beat pretty badly. So, do you remember Irma? We're coming up actually. We're almost on the anniversary of Irma itself, because I saw in my post today that there was something about like me trying to get wood to cover the windows in Irma. I think by this time you had headed for the hills. You were already out of Florida by this time. This storm has been called the Labor Day Hurricane, the Great Labor Day Hurricane, the Storm of the Century, because of just how powerful it was. It's been called Hemingway's Hurricane, and it's been called the Murder at Matecombe. So, over the course of tonight, every single time I mispronounce something, every time I struggle, you need to smack me.
Okay.
So that's going to be your goal tonight.
Okay.
All right, do you know who Hemingway is?
I think so. I've heard of him.
Do you know anything about him?
No,
Like
but
specific,
I've
or
heard
just like, I think I heard something.
I
hate
heard
when
something.
students do that.
I think I heard something.
No?
It's familiar. It's on the tip
It's
of my
familiar.
tongue.
Okay, so that's Ernest Hemingway. He's a great writer. Well, we can debate whether or not he's a great writer. He is associated with the Florida Keys. His his house, the Hemingway house, is haunted at the Florida Keys. He's considered one of the great American writers. For Whom the Bell Tolls, Sun Also Rises, The Old Man and the Sea. He is the master of the minimalist movement. Anyway, he's a big literary person who kids don't learn about anymore, from what I'm understanding. But he was also a man's man, right? So he was an ambulance driver in the Spanish-American War. He was a boxer. He fought bulls. He was one of those people that thought, like, you know, you need to go out there and you need to do things. And he was living in Key West at this time. So this is pre his suicide.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. I want to, as I'm going through a lot of this information tonight, I want to throw out that a lot of this I got, because I like to cite my sources, right? I got from Troy Taylor's blog spot. So Troy, if you don't know who Troy Taylor is, he's one of the most prolific paranormal writers. He's written a lot of ghost books. He had, I mean, some of the first ones that I went on to, I'm trying to remember the site, what it used to be. And this I found on his blog, and it was an old post, but it kind of had all this information. On September 2nd, 1935.
1935.
A Category 4 hurricane. Hit Florida, right? And obviously, so do you know where the Keys are, right? You get the geography of the Keys. For those who have only heard the Keys name, Florida obviously is, you know, it's a little peninsula. It's a peninsula, right? So off of the coast of the peninsula, which you can't see because they're so small, from like the coast of Miami, there is a whole bunch of little islands or keys that kind of go to the west into the Gulf of Mexico from where Miami is, right? So I agree with you. You either love or hate Hemingway, and I am not a fan of Hemingway. They kind of curve out, and it's some of the most beautiful places, they say, in Florida, some of the most beautiful vacation places. Key West is amazing. Just last night, even I was calling it Baby New Orleans. I mean, it's a really, it's an area steeped in history, steeped in culture, steeped in tragedy, because these are really part of America. They're part of Florida, and yet when you're there, you're almost in the middle of nowhere. They are these isolated little islands, which are they're vulnerable to hurricanes because they're just kind of out there, right? And so whenever they say, well, the hurricane lost force when it hit land, it doesn't have a chance to hit land before it hits the Keys. They're very close. They're very connected to Cuba as well, because, you know, they're less than 90 miles away from Cuba, and so it's an interesting area. September 2nd, a storm, Category 4. Some people have heard it say it was Category 5. It was 140 to 150 miles per hour sustained winds.
Sustained.
So
stayed there.
We'd stay there. So in other words, now you left. You've never experienced a hurricane. I'm not sure what the winds reached in Irma, but this would have blown Irma, by the time Irma was to us, out of the water, no pun intended. It had, however, gusts of up to 200 miles an hour.
Oh my God. So
everything it hit, it moved. Everything, and now keep in mind, it's raining that entire time as well. So the storm surges, right? So that would be like, just like waves upon the wave, were over 20 feet. It was a horrific storm, which once it hit Florida, there was less, right? There's damage that happened in Tampa. There's damage that happened in the rest of the Panhandle. But the real brunt of it was hit in the Keys. Key West got the worst of it. I shouldn't say Key West. I should say the Keys got the worst of it. Most of what we know about the storm today, I love that. This is going to be a story that's filled with a whole bunch of different characters. What we know from the storm, we know because of the journals and the diaries of Father Benito Vines, who was working, I believe, in Cuba. He was a Jesuit priest who was tracking the storm, right? And they said he didn't use equipment. He didn't use all this fancy stuff. Obviously, in 1935, how much fancy stuff is there? But they said he had almost a supernatural ability to predict, like, when they say we're in the cone, and they show all the spaghetti maps where it's like, and then it has one that's like random like this. You know what? When they show the spaghetti maps, they're all pretty much the same place, and always there's a few that are like completely random. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. You have seen a spaghetti map before of a hurricane, right? No. Okay. So Ella hasn't, living in Florida and having lived through like 3 hurricanes. You know the cone, though, at least, right? When they say you're in the cone. Okay. Well, way to be aware of things.
Man, I just know it's a hurricane.
You just know your mom and dad say, like, let's get the hell out of here. Make sure we're getting water. And get some hurricane snacks. This guy could predict everything, right? And he sent up word to the United States, which made its way to Washington as well. And I'll explain why in a minute.
D.C.?
Washington, D.C. And they asked it, like, well, what should we do to prepare for this hurricane?
What did he say?
Pray. Dude said, like...
Of course he did.
It was like, there's no... That's it, like, it's too late. The reason why he had gone to... the reason why he had specifically told Washington what was going on was because of a little thing called the New Deal. Now, for those who don't know, thank you, education. Thank you, Florida education. The New Deal was a set of initiatives set forth by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Do you know who that is,
I know
at least?
who Franklin Roosevelt
Okay.
is.
Who they were designed to jumpstart the economy, right? So all of these different agencies were formed, and for years, I mean, starting back in Fall River, right? Back in the Freetown State Forest, I've noticed this connection between the New Deal and the paranormal, right? There are so many paranormal stories, so many ghostly legends that start with a connection to the New Deal. Because one of the things he did was he sent people out for work. He sent people out to go into the forest to work the forests, right? Or to settle lands to, for national parks, for things like he sent people out. He started programs to start writers. Like, hey, do you want some money to be a writer? Here you go. The government gives it to you. We've taken the opposite side of that, which was he essentially caused the destruction of Pemberton Ferry. Mm-hmm. Because the New Deal took the land away from the people that were living there and kind of like, we're like, all right, we're going to do something. Part of the New Deal was he sent hundreds and hundreds of out of work, disabled war veterans from World War II, World War I, down to Florida. Talk about the worst punishment you can possibly imagine. You've survived war. Mm-hmm. You've made it back home.
Yeah.
You've made democracy safe for the world. All you want are benefits. All you want is a job, right? The unemployment rate, the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was so high, these veterans didn't have jobs. A lot of the people that we're talking about were near homeless or homeless. Alcoholism, PTSD, these kinds of things were running rampant with this group of people. And he's like, you know what I'm going to have you guys do? I'm going to have you guys go down to Florida, the southernmost part of Florida, and I want to have you work on a railroad bridge.
What the hell?
Exactly, what the hell. So, in 1912, pre-1912, I think it was 1908, a man by the name of Henry Flagler, smack, good. Have you heard that name at all? It's a very big name in Florida.
I think so, yes.
He was an oil man,
That's
right?
the dude who made the train tracks, the big train tracks. I read about it in The Land Remembered. The dude who made
Wait,
the
in what?
It was a book, The Land Remembered. So, and then there was he made like huge train tracks.
Oh, Ella's finally going to talk. Okay,
Materials
go ahead.
back and forth. No, I just remember that they took materials back and forth, and it was like the Flagler Railroad or something.
Right. So he had come down and absolutely fallen in love with Florida, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to settle Florida. So basically, you can't go anywhere on the East Coast where you're not in Flagler land. Like, everything's got his name on it. There's a college out there. I mean, it really is this kind of like, he's the man who helped to build Florida. He had built a railroad going from St. Augustine to Daytona.
Daytona, yeah.
Do you want to finish my thought, or?
No, you can do it.
He then was like, all right, we're good, and everything was settled, right? Then he was like, I'm going to build it from Daytona to West Palm Beach. And that was it. Boom. That's where he wanted to stop. The rest of Florida, because now you're hitting the Everglades kind of thing, rest of Florida he thought was undevelopable. Undevelopable. Beautiful. Because it was, right? We're talking the late 1800s, early 1900s. Florida was a swamp, right? Then he got the idea, because now he's looking, right? And he's like, well, if we could go down even further, we would have access to Cuba. We would have access to Central and South America. I'm just going to build it to Miami. And so he extended to Miami, and he is, along with the person who's dubbed the Queen of Miami, he is the person who is responsible for Miami bursting, right? And Miami becoming a place. And then he said, but I love going to Key West. And I'll be even more west. Problem is, there was no road, right? Now we're not talking about trying to pave something through jungle. Now we're not trying to like lay tracks down, and move across like little swamps. We're talking the ocean, right? These little keys, each of which kind of has their own personality, their own makeup. So he created what's been called Flagler's Folly, which is also known as the Overseas Railway. Okay? It connects by railroad, or connected by railroad, I should say, Miami and Key West.
Yeah.
So, spoilers, have you ever taken a railroad from Miami to Key West? No, it's not there anymore. That's why it's called Flagler's Folly, because it's gone, right? Essentially, the hurricane of 1935 destroyed the Overseas Railway, and that was an additional 165 miles to over these islands, build all those bridges. Now it's a road, right? Do you know what that road is? It's called? No?
I probably do.
7 Mile Bridge. Right? So I know a lot of people who their goal in life is to ride their motorcycle across the 7 Mile Bridge. It's a beautiful landscape, it's a beautiful trip. Takes you kind of hey, look, there's one of the keys. There's one of the keys. There's one of the keys. Took over 4,000 men in its initial creation. It finally opened up in 1912. He personally was the first person. He rode it. Hey, how you doing? All the way from Miami to Key West. Rolled into Key West. Saw Robert the Doll. I don't know if he actually saw Robert the Doll while he was there. And established it. But by 1935, it was already starting to show signs of deteriorating. Yeah.
No, I'm trying to remember the lake.
What lake?
The lake that started with an H. It's Superior.
Huron?
Yeah, that one. Thank you.
What about Lake Huron?
I don't know, man.
You're off by 3,000 miles.
Something you said reminded me of it. I don't remember what it was.
So, as part of the New Deal, he sent down all of these vets to essentially work on helping with the bridge. And a lot of them ended up in Islamorada, which I think I'm pronouncing right, so you're not allowed to slap me.
Do a half slap.
Islamorada, beautiful. I'm going to say Islamorada a lot, so let's hope that I'm pronouncing it right.
Islamorada?
Islamorada. Islamorada.
So you're pronouncing it wrong. So you get to hit your
Hit me again. I'm not even saying the PH word. I agree. Bridges are a crazy thing. And it was, they actually had to invent certain things to cross because if there's not, usually you have stable land here, there's a bridge that crosses you to the height, but this was actually, they had to plan the next bridge, the next part of the bridge as they were doing it. So there was a lot of technological advances that went with the building of this bridge. But not so much, right? The storm hit, and the Key West was actually not what they call the middle keys. So the middle keys are Islamorada, Craig Key, Long Key, and the two Matecombe keys were devastated. They were absolutely destroyed, and it took them years to recover. So that's a pretty bad, pretty horrific kind of thing going on. You can imagine that in the wake of that, there would be a lot of death. What are some of the things that make not only ghosts, but ghostly legends? Sudden death, right? Sudden deaths are responsible for what we think of as ghosts, right? Like you rarely hear of someone who had a long disease, lived a good life, had time to like say goodbye to their family, all those kind of things, and then becomes a ghost, right? And definitely those kind of people don't become ghostly legends.
Like a mission. They have a mission for being there, but when you're done, when you finish life, like what you need to do, then you don't have a reason to be here.
What do you think is something in your life that would, if you were to die right now, would make you come back? What would be a ghostly mission you'd have to have?
To kill Devin.
Oh my word, seriously?
Yeah.
Anyway, number one, deaths. So let's talk about the deaths.
So let's talk about it.
Let's talk about death. Why don't we bring the number two? Unofficially, 485 died in that 24-hour span. Okay? So by the 4th, things are pretty much settled. They're able to kind of do things. 485 deaths. Now, the majority of those deaths were those World War II vets, World War I vets. The camps that they were living in were tents. They were lean-tos. In other words, they weren't living here in luxury or even in really good work camps to work on these bridges to make these improvements. They were living in the remnants of the buildings that people had used in 1905 to work on them, right? And there was no support whatsoever. And so when this hurricane hit, that first wave, the people who were dying because they were inexperienced, right? They were like, well, should we ship them back? Should we? They were told at least 3 or 4 days ahead of time. And the government was kind of like, they'll be fine. Don't worry about it. These things never hit like they're supposed to hit. And so the government never pulled them out, nor would they have had the ability to, right? And also, what's important to remember is when you're in Key West, there ain't nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's just land.
Right? You're like, water, railroad, water, right? So it's you really are trapped. There was no way they were going to get them out to evacuate them. They'd already gotten their advice to pray. And so, to some degree, these people were left to fend for themselves. It hit. There is no way for them to know the exact number of people who died. Mm-hmm. When, heaven forbid, what was the one that we just had? The hurricane we just had? Elsa?
Elsa?
if Elsa had been worse than it was, and even look at Katrina and look at some of the things that have happened to New Orleans. These are people who are on land who suffer from
Louisiana.
Last week.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name of it. Was it Fred? Freddie,
Freddie,
right?
because it's Elsa, so it's
right.
F.
Just like that, right? they're unable to get an accurate count of exactly how many people died, and that's on land, right? Now I want you to imagine people got swept out to sea, right? People got buried in the water, like they drowned in the water. They say to this day, there are sometimes bones that wash up on the shore.
Imagine being like a little kid and like playing on the beach, and there's just like the bones washing up on the shore. That'd be terrifying.
They say it still happens.
That'd be
Happens 80 years later, right?
That'd be like traumatic.
Also, one of the things that I found horrific was they said only a few years ago, people were scuba diving in the Keys, and they found essentially trapped in the mangroves underneath the water a skeleton.
Oh my god.
Which they were able to date back to the hurricane of 1935, right? Which is why it's called like the perfect storm, the storm of the century, like just so many people in that one little area. But the story gets a little worse. We're not even close to like why this is a horrific event in history. Are you ready for the next level?
There's another level?
There's another level. Enter J.J. Haycroft, who for all intents and purposes should be deemed one of the greatest heroes in Florida history, but he's not going to be.
Oh no.
I want us to keep in mind that, you know, a wise man once said, Jeff Belanger, a wise man once said that a house is always haunted by the most famous person to have lived there or to have been there, right? That's why we have, for example, who knows who could be in Hemingway's house, but it's obviously got to be Ernest Hemingway because he's the most famous person to be associated with it, right? Obviously, any place I've ever been, when I die, they're going to say that I was to haunt it. It's our way of understanding the paranormal, right? Because we can put a face to it. It's why when they go like, oh, I'm going to do a past life regression on you. You used to be Marie Antoinette. Like 87 people I know were all Marie Antoinette or Cleopatra, right? There's this connection. It makes it more real because these are touchstones. You can say, I know that person, so I can imagine what that's like. In the same way, I'm gonna pose this out. I'll wait for you to finish yawning. Is a ghost?
Is a ghost.
Shut up. Is a ghost a product of the most famous, horrific thing to happen there? Right? Like, in other words, the ghost that we're going to talk about when we eventually get to the ghost part of this, the ghosts that we're going to talk about, are they a product of this tragedy? Or is it just a crazy-ass haunted place for other reasons, but we assume it's because of...
I feel like people think that it's like the most famous because that's the most like that's what makes the most sense. Especially if it was like a great tragedy.
And I think that we do that too. We're like, we hear gunshots. There was a person who died in a gunfight. It's got to be them. Whereas like we really don't know the history of it. So Lizzie Borden is a really great example of this. Paranormal stuff happens there all the time, but there have been multiple tragedies that have happened there over the years, but we associate it automatically with Lizzie Borden. What? You say you don't know who Lizzie Borden is?
No, I know who Lizzie Borden is.
Enter great Floridian hero, almost, J.J. Haycroft, who sets out from Miami on the famous Engine 447. Just sounds powerful, doesn't it? Engine 447.
Engine 447.
I'm coming to get you guys!
Engine 447.
Right? And an 11-car rescue train.
You spelled rescue.
I know. Oh, my word. I so knew you were going to say that. I looked at it. We didn't say anything about spelling. Why are you slapping me for that? You know I can't spell.
Because that's even worse. But you're an English teacher.
The conditions when he set out. This is someone who survived by the name of Bernard Russell. You could see nothing. Mm-hmm. The winds are howling and the rains are pounding. It was chaos. It felt like an eternity. It very well could have been. That was from one of the survivors. This was, imagine a hurricane in the dark with no shelter whatsoever. Now, you've never been through one. Talk to your uncle about it, right? Your uncle was, and everyone was. I remember when I first moved down to Florida, we had Hurricane Faye that happened not long after, like 2 or 3 months after we got to Florida. And it was the first hurricane that was really hitting since Charlie, which if you live down here, Charlie was huge. Charlie gets overlooked because Katrina came like almost right after it. But Charlie devastated the area that we live in specifically. The hurricane literally went like this. And then like hit Punta Gorda. And your uncle was trapped in it. Like couldn't go anywhere. Just was like in the house by himself as it's like falling down all around him. It hit that fast. It turned that fast. These are horrific conditions, but he was in a shelter. He was in the house. Imagine me outside. Imagine not being able to go anywhere. You can feel free to like step off if you're like falling on me here.
I'm a little tired.
No lights or signals, right? All the power is out. Are you leaving?
For a little bit.
Okay, she's leaving for a little bit. All the power is out. What power there was in the first place. The winds are crazy. The rain is just making it zero visibility. And this is not like running across the United States. This is not, going west, where if you're off the tracks, if you derail, you're derailing into the woods. You're derailing into... This is 100% pretty much everywhere that you go is nothing but water, right? You are on this little stretch, just about as big as the train, going through stations on either side once you get to like the major places. But we're talking no way that you could go like left or right and not have a horrible, horrible thing happen to you. So he finally goes into Islamorada station and has to stop, right? He goes like a little bit by it and then has to stop because the track has been destroyed. So I'm not sure why you find that funny. So we posted a picture of a painting where it was the station was destroyed, like the track is destroyed, and that was the place that's supposedly haunted. One of the places that's supposedly haunted. That's an hour down the road, right? This was completely destroyed. You couldn't even get to that other one, right? That other one is located in right next to Baha'i Honda Key. Like, this is an hour from that. So this is like, he wasn't going to be able to go anywhere. So he pulls up everyone who's at the station, because this was the primary work area for all of these people. They start like rushing to the train, right? Because they think he's passing. There's this mad, crazy kind of, rush of all the people trying to jump into the boxcars, get out of safety, right? And obviously the plan is he can't go forward. He can't go to Key West. He can't go the next hour and 45 minutes. When I say these things, I'm saying like by car. So imagine it's a bridge, train. He can't do it. There's no track left. So he's going to have to go the entire distance in reverse, right? Which, okay, trains do that. They're accustomed to that. They're on a track. The last of the boxcars topples over, making it impossible for him to back up. So now imagine people are filling up the boxcars. Now we have not only the people who were there to work, not only the veterans, but we also have the citizens of Islamorada who are throwing their families into these boxcars and their possessions into it, thinking that they're rescued. Obviously, then you go back. Now, we have a hard time conceiving this if we haven't been exposed to this. Like Ella would have no concept of this whatsoever. Just exactly how long 11 boxcars is, right? So if you've been at a stop, there is a train that I haven't seen it run in like the last 5 years. But if you've ever been at a train stop, I remember. 88 Normandy Ave in Cambridge. There was a train that went right behind it, and over the 33 years of me interacting with that place, I think I saw the train, or was on the road when the train was there, like maybe 7 or 8 times in like 30 something years. I've been stopped at that train, those tracks, like 80 times in the past 12 years. And it takes forever, right? It runs through Fort Myers. I'm not even sure where it's going. It runs through Fort Myers, and I think there's a total of maybe 7 cars on that. We have a hard time understanding just how big a train boxcar in those days was. Imagine them filling up with people. Easy, right? You have all of these people, you have all this situation, all right, strongest people get out, we'll unlatch it, we'll together toss it into the ocean, right? We'll tumble it over. Except for remember, there's a hurricane going on. One by one, all 11 boxcars fall off, twist up, get unlatched, and fall into the ocean. These cars that have been filled with people, with families. So imagine that J.J. Haycroft rolled into the station. You finally think you've got it, you're solved. The only part of the train that survived was the actual engine, right? And J.J. Haycroft and his crew, right? The engine and the crew were the only thing that survived. And obviously, they had to back up and go into Miami. So I want us to imagine for a moment the tragedy of being in a boxcar, which is now falling off a bridge in the dark, in the middle of a Category 4 storm, and the utter confusion. The utter darkness, the screams alone. Like, this was a horrific, absolutely devastating way to die. When they say that 485 people died, when there's 485 people who are officially at this one location. So remember, when I say these numbers, this is really just the numbers of people who died in Islamorada. So this is like this part of the tragedy. They're giving you an estimate, right? They're doing it by receipts, pay receipts. Keep in mind that some of these people had come down to Florida and decided to take off, right? And other people had decided to join up with them. And so there really is no way to have an accurate number. And they do it by like pay receipts and things like that of who exactly and how many people exactly died in those 24 hours on that stretch of island. No way to know. And like I said, bodies keep turning up. That's where it should end, right? So we imagine that, okay, I've got 5 places really here, that are primed for haunting. Just based on the fact of like the horrific story that I just told you. Except for the story is not over yet. There were so many people who died. Bodies washing up on the shore. Rescue and retrieval, right? Rescue and recovery, I should say. that it was an absolute mess. Keep in mind, this is in the aftermath of a hurricane, so it's not as if the hurricane goes and everything is hunky-dory. If you've ever, my New England people, you probably feel the same thing about a blizzard, right? Although you guys suffered a pretty bad hurricane last week as well. After Hurricane Irma hit, it hit on a Sunday. Tuesday, I left the house, right? Left the house. Wednesday, I went into work, not to work, but because my school had become a shelter. So we're talking Sunday storm, and Irma was not nearly as bad as this by the time it got to Southwest Florida. 3 days, and the roads were still covered in trees, right? There was still ceilings that were off. There's a business. It does water, right? Like salt for water and fixing well water and pumps and stuff like that. Right over there, like next block over there. Just got its ceiling back. 4 years later, and it just got its roof back. Like, that's how to do this in those conditions. 1935 was nearly impossible, with that many people in one location having lost their lives. They start shipping the bodies. And keep in mind, where you're going, the bridge is down, right? Boats. What's left of the track on its way back to Miami. The U.S. government, and then this is backed up by the Florida government, say these bodies are not going anywhere. They're given orders to bury or cremate the dead where they are. One kind of batch of people makes their way to Miami before the embargo, and that's what they called it, right? In all the documentation, which is part of one of the craziest parts of this, they called it an embargo. Before the embargo was put in, some of them got to Miami. But most of them never left the Keys. These are not people with a connection to the Keys. These are not people who had a good, long life and a timely death. What we call, if we've talked about this before, the idea of a good death, right? That you die with your family, right? You're able to pass something on. Like this whole idea of like there being a way to die that is noble, and that you find peace. Just like Ella was saying before, that unfinished business idea, the idea that everything is unfinished because you're maybe thousands of miles from home. You are buried maybe not to your religious beliefs. You die suddenly. You're cremated. You're stuck in Florida. All of these kind of things make for a perfect mix of unsettled souls. I'm going to give you just some of the statistics here of the dead, the way the dead play themselves out here. Shipped back to relatives, right? So these are people who their bodies were actually able, before the embargo, and even I think 2 of these were post, like they had died and then they were buried and then they were sent back. Shipped back to relatives. Veterans 9, civilians 5. So that's 14. Remember, we're talking about nearly 500 people. 14 of them made them with their ways back to relatives. Cremated on the Keys. What could you do? There were so many who died, you couldn't even bury them all. Cremated on the Keys, 168 veterans, 130 civilians. I'm going to say those numbers again. 168 veterans were cremated on the spot in the Keys. 130 civilians. Buried, and this number is partially, it doesn't have it here, but some of these are, I believe, also cremations. Buried by the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, is that what it's called? Buried by, I've got this written down here, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. These are the ones that made their way to Miami. 80 veterans and 29 civilians. So essentially, the ones that were in Miami, FERA, the U.S. government, bought a huge plot and cremated the majority of them and put them on this plot. Plot 2A in the cemetery. I remember that number. Some of them got actual burials, so 15 additional civilians were buried in private plots, so not in this kind of, I don't want to call it a mass grave because I haven't seen it. I don't believe it. It does. I believe those who are cremated are all in one area with a memorial, and then the rest of them are kind of splattered throughout. And then another 15 of them have private plots in that same cemetery. Another 10 were buried. Now the rest of these are civilian numbers. Another 10 were buried in Homestead. 3 went to Key West. 3 went to Dania, and then another 33 were buried at different locations in that area. For a total of 485 official burials. That is horrific. I want us to sit back and just imagine, we have next week, right? We have, in a few days, we have the memorial coming up for 9/11, right? And the effort that went into getting the people from 9/11 out from underneath the wreckage, acknowledging that we weren't able to find certain people, but they probably perished at that spot, and getting them back to their families, right? We've talked about this, and we've talked about graves of Europeans, a grave of Americans over in Europe from World War I and World War II. Obviously, we talk about it when we look at Oak Ridge Cemetery, and we talk about the 21 pilots who gave their life in training here, who are still buried here. This idea that you're so far from home. The number of people who are trapped on the Keys. Now, for most of us, we hear that expression, right? We hear trapped on the Keys, and that's like an ideal world, right? We're like, I would love to be trapped on the Keys. That's not what's going on here. So, again, like I was asking before, the number of ghosts that were there. This is an area that was heavily settled by Native Americans. This is a place where has a long history, right? Are the ghosts that are there the ghosts of these people, or potentially other ghosts, right? We follow. It's crazy. as folklorists, as haunted folklorists, we follow the tragedy. We look at where bad things have happened, and we try to line it up with where unexplained things have happened. It's kind of a messed up system if you think about it, right? We follow the tragedy. We document the tragedy to understand the unexplained. I was thinking exactly of Flanders Field, actually. This is one of those cases where I remember us joking about it 2 weeks ago, being like, I would love to do that. Like, let's do more research on that one. And then you take a step back and you realize, wow, this is something I didn't learn. I never heard about this. Ella is in 7th grade. She's never heard of just how many people died in this tragedy in Florida. Devin's 16. He hasn't heard about it, right? She literally heard about the she knew about the trains, right? She knew about Flagler and like the train. She had never heard about this tragedy. I'm not saying it's a cover up because there's a lot of information out there about it, but it's one of those things where that's pretty horrific. If we're talking upwards of 500 people that we know of dying in one area at one time, it's not surprising that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places, 6 if you include the cemetery in Miami. 6 places that all have ghosts attached to them that are attached to this one day. Woodlawn Cemetery. I keep wanting to. So let's go over the list, shall we? This seems like it would be a really interesting legend trip to do because it's a great way to show respect. The places that I'm going to talk about are all accessible. You might not be able to get like exactly on the spot. I don't see myself climbing the remnants of a destroyed bridge. I actually invited my sister to come down and do these with me because I'm like, I know her husband would really love to drive his motorcycle across the 7 Mile Bridge. 5 places. Let's see kind of which ones are the most likely, which stories have kind of the deepest history. I have a feeling of this. I've already contacted 2 people, 3 people if you include Lee from Ghost Pro. He did this run last week. There are stories out there and there are legends out there that are just not. They're told by islanders. Anyone who knows the Keys knows that, much like Astor, they are on island time, right? They are. They're not closed off, but their stories are not the kind of stories that you read online. Like, you can go to Key West, and you can just, like, roll up on someplace and tell, like, all right, tell me about the ghosts, and they'll just start talking. Some of them make them online, most of them don't. I have a feeling that this is like, I'm not saying it's a week, because that would be a lot of money to spend a week in the Keys, but this is like an extended, at least 3 or 4 day, talking to all these different places. Because I think it starts in Miami. It starts in Woodlawn Cemetery. Woodlawn Cemetery it has its own ghost stories attached to it. I wasn't able to find anything having to do with at least online, I wasn't able to find anything having to do with Plot 2C or 2A or whatever it is. But I have a feeling it would start there. It would probably start with Coral Castle, to be honest with you, and then make its way there. I'm just going to kind of go over these, and I want you guys to tell me which ones you think are the most likely to be, A, connected to the actual tragedy, and then B, is someplace you would go. Keep in mind, if you want to go for a trip, I am totally hip on helping you pay your way through the Keys if you want to go legend tripping on these with me. So I think this would be an amazing like 3-day hitting as many of these spots. The first is the Windley Key Fossil Reef Geological State Park. So this is something that I believe existed before the hurricane, but has gotten more notoriety since then. And keep in mind, most of these are all in one location, right? They're all in one town. Before the tragic category, see this one listed as Category 5 hurricane. Many people sought refuge in the Windley Key Forest, Key Fossil Reef Geological State. I'm going to get this right, or Ella's going to like come whipping out of her room and smack me. Windley Key Fossil Reef Geological State Park. Worst name ever, but it really tells you exactly what it does. They went to this location looking to ride out the storm. There was something about it, and I haven't been able to find out what that is. Other than the fact that it's completely beautiful, they say. They all went there to this one location and the storm killed them all. They were all wiped out. They were all trapped in, essentially, there is a pit there. And the people thought, like, because it makes logical sense, right? And a hurricane is kind of like a tornado, you go low, right? And if there's nothing around that's blowing, you're pretty much safe. Kind of logically, except for there's no basements here, right? So it really is like you don't go up high. They went into this pit, and whether it was the sea surge or whatever it was, they all of them died. And so it said that when you go to this pit, you can still hear the people screaming. People who have walked around the pit will suddenly get hit, this is something that I've never really heard of before. They'll suddenly get hit by, like a burst of wind, right? Like it'll just be like a random gust of wind, but like hard wind. People have reported hearing or feeling extra cold, of sudden wet spots, right? Like all of a sudden they'll just be like, their shirt will be like soaking wet, like almost instantaneously. It's almost as if this area, this pit, is somehow a time slip, or it has these little like ghostly, like pops of kind of weirdness that happen that make it seem as if you like go back to that day and kind of like you relive that day. I think that's a really interesting place to go. I mean, I have this, when I hear this is one of those things where I have a feeling like you need to go there and physically see it to actually get what it is. But I get this idea, or I have this vision of like a mass grave, which I don't think is what happened. I think it happened in some of these places. They burned all these people together. But I just get this idea when they talk about pit that it is everyone died in this pit, and I think that's maybe how the stories have come out, right? Because I don't see everyone being like, let's go into the pole, but maybe definitely someplace I would want to go. The next, and this is probably the most well documented one. This is the Hurricane Monument. So there is a Hurricane Monument in Islamorada, dedicated to those people who died, right? And I believe the cremated remains are like at the monument itself. So the monument is where the actual ashes of these people are. The most common sighting there, so people once again have heard strange voices, they've seen these shadows, is a little boy. Now all it says is sightings of a little boy, and that is repeated time and time and time again. It is thought that, remember I told you the story earlier about the scuba diving and them seeing the boy, they've seen the skeleton. That was thought to have been a little boy. I'm not sure how far that location is from this, but they think it's someone who was actually cremated and left there. I'm not sure how much I agree with that one, right? I think that I think it's more likely. And I know, once again, this is like, not only are we breaking the rule of no south, we're also breaking the rule of kid ghosts, right? I'm a firm believer that ghost is actually someone who lost his parents. I don't think it's someone who's cremated. I think it's someone who died somewhere else, maybe was never recovered, and is looking for their parents, right? This would be a great place. Now, keep in mind, we're tracking legends. This would be a great place to bring a psychic along and see if they could connect this boy with his family, right? Because you have to think, no matter what it is, if it's a little boy and he's left behind, he's looking for connection, he's looking for his family, right? Like, that would be the settlement, that would be the completion of his journey. There's also another interesting kind of connection or legend attached to this, is that they say that the monument itself was built wrong, right? And I've heard a few different kind of commentaries on this, but the memorial is there, and it shows, is it trees? I think it's palm trees. Like they're carved into so the trees are blowing against the wind, right? So the winds came in from the north, and they were coming like this way. So I guess that would be like they were coming west, and the trees were all blowing east, and it's kind of like they think some of the spirits are unrested at that location because they messed up the memorial. And of course, the people were like, "No, we did it to say we're fighting against the wind. You know, it seems to me you lived your life." That the reason why they're blowing that way is to show that they were in defiance of where the wind was blowing, the direction the wind was blowing in. Other people say it was just a complete mistake. I have a hard time believing that the dead really care which way the pictures are in a memorial, whether they're going north and south, but it's another one of those, one of those monuments where it's like, the way that it was created, the way that it was designed is what sparks part of the legend, right? The next one is the Channel 2 Bridge, right? So the Channel 2 Bridge is where that whole episode happened with good old J.J. Haycroft and all that stuff. This is the station where the station used to be in Islamorada. They call it the Channel 2 Bridge, and according to many, people have heard the sound of a ghost train at the bridge. They say the bridge shakes, they hear a whistle, and have even reported to have seen it. People there have also heard screams, people hitting the water, basically like a residual haunting of the moment of that day. And that is that Channel 2 Bridge in Islamorada. Now, the interesting thing is that that's not the bridge we were talking about, right? The bridge we were talking about is about an hour away from that. So the remnants I showed, even the picture that I showed in promotions for the show, that is the Baha'i Windley Key Bridge, which is another ghost of it. And this is where the legend part comes in, which is interesting, right? That bridge is said to experience the exact same thing. Ghost train, you hear a whistle, you hear the screeching of the tires, right, or the screeching of the rails. You hear people screaming, trying to get away, right? Except for the fact that nothing happened at that location. Yeah, the storm destroyed the tracks, right? But it was an hour away from where the people died. I'm not saying people didn't die there, but there was no train tragedy that actually happened there, right? The train was never able to get down that far because the tracks were destroyed leading into it. And yet these two locations have the same exact legend. Now, whether that's because other things are happening and people are, like other unexplained things, and they're hearing the train because maybe they know the story, or whether it's just misinformation has led to this one location, because it is pristine. You've seen the pictures that I posted. If you followed, like, there's a picture of it on the Backpackerverse 10 most wanted list, the 10 greatest first date list that we put out there. It's right there, right? Like, it's there as for something to see, right? Like, it still exists. I wonder if people are just putting one legend on top of the other, but it would be a great dual day thing to do, right? And it might even be a really cool thing to do with two different people, right? Like, I'm legend tripping one, you're legend tripping the other at the exact same time, and let's see what happens, right? So this idea that which one is the real haunted bridge sounds kind of like the Amos and Ingrid story, right? Like, we were the wrong bridge the entire time. I wonder if this bridge, one of these bridges, is the actual haunted bridge, or maybe they both are. And it's that whole idea that we were talking about, like, people are hearing something, tragedy has happened there, and for whatever reason that might be, and people are saying, well, the most famous thing that happened was the hurricane of 1935. That must be what the cause of this bridge is, because they all cite it as a reason for there being ghosts excuse me, at the second bridge. The last one. So if you are looking to make your way down to Florida, if you live in Florida and you're not doing anything, I am on the 16th. I'm doing a presentation for kids in Marco. Why not head down to the Keys? I'm already in Marco because the last one I'm going to talk about right now. Rita makes a great point, which is train whistles are often carried on the wind. So that hour across the ocean might not be that far of a distance to be hearing, especially when you're talking ghostly train whistles. Might not be a crazy number for it, right? A crazy distance for it. So this is the haunted canal at Robbie's Marina. Now, this one I have to dig into a little bit more. This one seemed the least likely to me, but it's I love anniversary type hauntings and haunted legends. She went into this haunted canal. The woman went into the haunted canal. The spirits in Haunted Canal are said to only come out one night a year, on October 17th. So on October 17th, in this haunted canal, they're said to be seeking revenge. Now, this is a very interesting concept. Now, the first thing I want to say is it's attached to a very specific marina on a very specific day, which totally sounds like a gimmick, right? Like, the idea that you go to this place sounds like Robbie's probably has a lot to do with the actual hauntings. But this idea, which we don't find a lot of in haunted legends, which is vengeful spirits. The idea that the ghosts are coming to get revenge or intentionally just to scare you. Usually have that scaredness is by us not having the ability to process what's going on, right? First question I always ask, were you scared because you felt threatened, or were you scared because something was happening that you didn't understand? And almost always the answer is, it's something I didn't understand, that's why. These ones seem to want to, for reasons unknown, want to scare you. They want to get some kind of revenge on you. That is definitely one that I've got to do a little bit more research on, because that seems completely crazy and insanely fun. And I say fun in that I have a feeling that it has a lot to do with the business, and it has a lot to do with promotions, right? It happens to happen a week before Halloween or 2 weeks before Halloween. People get there. Like, I would love to go to Robbie's and see what's going on, make contact with them. And the other one, the last one, which I wasn't able to find too much on, even though I searched in several different places, was this idea of there's a swamp or a swampy island which was not identified in anything that I was able to read. And these green, almost like glowing green spirits that inhabit this island. So people say that these are the ghosts of people who died in the hurricane in the water, and their spirits somehow made it to this swampy section, and they're still stuck there, right? And that when you go there, this is totally sounds like one of those, it's like a perfect storm of the century, perfect storm of a tragedy happened there. We have something unexplained going on, which probably sounds like bioluminescent algae or something. And these glowing ghosts that are supposed to be seen in this one section that are the people who tried to swim to shore after being knocked off the bridge and never made it there. But now they're kind of trapped on this island as these kind of glowing green swampy ghost things. It seems like let's just take every possible Florida type legend. We got swamp, we got storms, we got people trapped, we've got all this stuff, natural swampland, and put it all together. And this is one that I really want to look into more, that I was able to find the least amount. One of the things that I think that this trip is, we have all the time these stories. There are tons of books out there, Ghosts of the Keys. Specifically, they focus on Key West, right? Ghosts of the Keys and stories of the Keys, things like that. This is the first time I've ever heard of this, any of these having to do with the hurricane of 1935. This is the first exposure I've had to this story. And it happened, bam, and it was Labor Day. And I'm literally, like, on Labor Day, discovering this stuff, going like, oh my word, this is amazing, this is amazing, this is amazing. So this is one of those ones that I think is going to continue to evolve. Yes, I would love to go there on October 17th and actually look for some of these things. It's a Sunday. I don't know if I can take that Monday off. I don't know if there's like a holiday. I know there's a holiday in October. I'm not sure which Monday we have off, but hopefully it's this one. So this is a story. And these are legends that I'm definitely going to continue to follow up on. And you can follow up with me on them as I kind of not only explore these, but explore other stories, both in the swamps, but also in the forests, as you discovered, if you're following me. Make sure you are seeing exactly what I'm doing and exactly how some of these legends play out by following the show on social media and me on social media. So if you're looking into Instagram, and thank you, Instagram audience, for being with me tonight. My Instagram is Spooky Tripping. If you are following me on Twitter, it's Spooky Balzano. Are any of my people following me on Twitter? Does anyone care about what I've put out on Twitter? I don't think so, but I've put it out there anyway. And of course, my Facebook is facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. The show is on just about every podcast platform if you want to subscribe. Hear some of our earlier episodes. Remember, I'm still looking for great suggestions on what we should do for the 100th episode. And we are on midnight.fm, where it's always midnight. And we have... Thank you, Ella. Ella's calling from her bedroom. And from what I understand, Tim has entered a league, and so he's not doing Midnight Society on Tuesdays. So pretty much I can go as long as I want on Tuesdays for the next few months. So that should be an exciting turn of events for me. So for now, make sure that you're following us. If you have information about these legends or any other ghostly legends throughout the state of Florida, or anything that just kind of like is odd here in the Sunshine State, get in contact with us. My name is Christopher Balzano.
And my name is Ella Balzano.
You can't come back
yes,
just for the ending.
Yes, I am coming back.
Seriously, like you ditch me, and then all of a sudden it's like, I want to say midnight.fm.
I know, but it was in my room because I don't like talking about like the deaths and stuff.
She likes talking about the ghosts, but not the tragedies that cause them.
No, because you're like they're twisting and I have no idea what they're doing and they're screaming in anguish. Like, no, thank you.
I'm trying to set the mood. Anyway, I'm Christopher Balzano.
I'm Ella Balzano temporarily.
Temporarily here, and here's hoping that all of your trips
are legendary.